Hi, I'm Jordan, and welcome to another episode of 10 Speeds Podcast. Today, I'll be interviewing a veteran of 10 years working as a dispatcher. We'll be learning the good, the bad, and the ugly of this critical role in the trucking industry. But before we begin, I invite you to follow and subscribe to any of our social media platforms so you can be up to date with the latest industry trends and 10 speed news. So, let's begin. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another podcast with 10 Speed. I'm here with Merary Nava. Merary Nava, welcome to the podcast. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Merary Nava. I work as a dispatcher. I've been working as a dispatcher for over 10 years. And well, that's that.
Well, Merari, so I know that you're from Clint, Texas. So tell me about Clint. Is it very known for the trucking industry? Because it is a very small town in Texas. So tell me about like the opportunities in the job world in as a dispatcher.
Okay, so Clint, Texas is a very small town. It's actually at the outskirts of El Paso, which is the more known city there nearby. Now, dispatch opportunity is not as accessible if you're not working for a big corporation.
Mhm.
There's a lot of trucking companies there because it is a border city. So
Okay.
there's a lot of shipments coming in and leaving, imports and exports all the time. However, there are many bigger trucking companies that do contracts.
Hmm.
So if most of the people that work in the dispatch industry, they do work for the big companies already. So if you're an independent dispatcher, it is a little bit harder. Or normally, what you do is that you work for a owner operator. That's what they're called, which are companies that have maybe one uh, to five trucks in their companies. So it's a very smaller trucking opportunity pool per se for dispatchers.
Okay. So for you, being in the 10 years working as a dispatcher, have you stayed with just one company or how did you get your start in it actually?
Okay, so I actually started right after I graduated, only because one of my family members owned some trucks back then, and it was like the fastest job to get, I guess. But once I got experience in it, I did work for other companies, but mainly stayed with one company throughout the 10 years. But the thing is that when you work as an independent dispatcher, you can work for multiple trucking companies at the same time.
Okay, so for you, working as a dispatcher with 10 plus experience, how has your role evolved and what are your responsibilities like?
Okay, so to be honest, the responsibilities really depend on what you agree with the company that you're working for.
Mhm.
For instance, the first companies I worked with, my responsibility was literally just find the freight for them to move, do the logistics, as in make sure that the truck gets from point A to point B, and then they have a reload, and that everything goes smooth, right? But um, with other companies, I also did their invoicing, their bookkeeping. It really just depends what you agree with that company.
So I assume doing the bookkeeping, it was a very small company, right? If
Yeah. So with that one specifically, it was they had 10 in their fleet. They had 10 trucks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then so from there, um, knowing like your responsibilities depending on like with the company size that you're in, how
Yeah.
what would you prefer as like being able to experience the bigger companies with the smaller companies?
To be honest, I feel like for somebody that's barely going in, I feel like maybe a bigger company would suit best,
Uh-huh.
only because a bigger company has more connections. So you
Okay.
will struggle less looking for the freights and stuff. And they already have connections also with the brokers. So
Okay.
sometimes you don't even have to use the load boards or
Okay.
the load pages. So that makes your job easier. And also, bigger companies do only expect you to look for the load, and that's it. You don't
Mm.
have to do many of the extras that smaller companies um, are
Demand of you.
expecting.
Hmm.
Yeah, or demand of you, yes.
Oh, okay. So you would say that you're in between from a dispatcher and a planner, like towards like more veteran that you are now.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. And so from there, what are some challenges that you have faced throughout this time working?
One of the things that uh, any dispatcher, especially like I said, working with smaller companies, you have to keep in mind that bigger companies tend to have contracts already.
Okay.
And those contracts, they don't get affected by the low amount of loads
Hmm.
or low production of any given uh, goods, produce, machinery, or anything, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't affect them because they already have a contract. Now, smaller companies, when you work with independent trucking companies, it does affect you because
Okay.
certain months, for instance, I'll speak about where the city of Clint, right? When it comes to the beginning of the year, which is January, February, March, it's very low.
Okay.
Uh, Towards the end of the year, it goes low again. So it's up and down. So
Okay.
you have to consider that also because when you're working, especially most dispatchers do work on a commission base,
Hmm.
and that is it just depends on your company. But most people do work for a commission. So if the loads are very low,
Your
the
pay is
rates
low.
drop. Yeah,
Okay.
so it's not good for you. So
Yeah.
that's why you have to take advantage of when the rates go high. That's your time.
And that's your time to make your money, basically.
Yes, correct.
So basically, it's a very fluctuating job
Yes,
in the
it
sense
is.
of pay. But
Yes.
is it always like that for any type of dispatcher, or is it more for the smaller companies that it's like
Like
that?
I said, it is more for the smaller ones because if you work for a big company or a big corporation, most of them don't pay you by commission.
Okay.
They just pay you for salary
Okay.
because
Hmm.
it does not matter what time of the year it is, they will have something to move. Maybe they won't earn as much, but they'll keep your pay a decent amount.
A decent amount. Oh, okay. So for you, w has there ever been like a story that you retell because it was just high stress and basically you're searching for a load or something goes wrong along the way? Can you please share a story?
So, I think that it was mainly like the first years I started doing it
Okay.
because since it was people that I knew personally,
Hmm.
like I wanted everything to be perfect for them, right?
Okay.
But you
Yeah.
have to understand that in this industry, not everything goes according to plan.
Yeah, for
Even if
sure.
everybody does their own part, there's always external factors that
Like
come in,
traffic,
switch things. Okay.
traffic weather.
So anything, all these things that you cannot imagine will go wrong the day that you least expect. And I remember at the beginning when I started, everything, I was just like stressed with everything because I wanted everything to be perfect. And because my time zone in Texas is mountain time.
Okay.
And most of the big companies, brokers, they're in the Eastern time. So I have 2 hour um behind, right? I'm
Yeah.
already 2 hours behind. So whenever my trucks would go to New York, it was a struggle for me.
Okay.
Because in New York, any driver knows that going to the East Coast is the worst thing
Okay.
because um roads are not meant for big trucks.
Okay.
Bridges are not meant for big trucks. And not only that is that all this traffic, all these people, you have to be, looking out. So one time, and most of these loads that are produce loads, they're very time sensitive. Like if you don't arrive when you said you are, and even if it's half a day later, they will reject the whole load. And that's
And
something that you have to fix because
yeah.
even though you weren't driving, it's your problem.
Okay.
So I remember one truck didn't make it on time because there was a crash. I don't remember. I think it was Georgia or Tennessee. And remember that truckers can only drive for certain hours. They cannot just drive until they get there. No, there's a lot of rules, which you also have to know as a dispatcher. His time was running out. It ran out. He couldn't make it. He made it to the market, the Bronx market, uh, half a day later, but they close in the afternoon. So you have to wait until the next morning. Point is, they rejected the load. So the broker said literally, that is your problem, not my problem, fix it. And to be honest, it is not only the dispatcher's problem, it is the broker's because he has the client, not I don't have the client.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
to me, that was very because I couldn't do anything about it. And I was barely gaining experience
Mm-hmm.
as to how to handle those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that is one that I just had to take a deep breath and just talk. And I skipped the broker. I went straight to the client was
Okay.
or the customer, which was way more understanding than the broker. So eventually we sorted the thing out. But whenever you are a dispatcher, you have to keep that in mind that sometimes you're gonna have to fix problems on the spot, and you're gonna have to jump people to get those things off.
Not only to find loads, you have to be basically a shark. You have to be a shark within working as a dispatcher when
Yes.
when it comes to communication.
Oh, yes, yes. Communication is a must because you have
Okay.
to be communicating between the broker,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the customer, if it's like a direct freight, and the driver. The driver
Mm-hmm.
cannot not answer his phone. You have to have him online 24/7. And that's another thing. You might work even 16 hours sometimes just because they don't deliver or they don't unload the driver. So you have
Mm-hmm.
to stay on the line until they unload him. So
Mm-hmm.
those things are a little bit stressful on
Mm-hmm.
that sense.
Do you feel like you had days off while working as a dispatcher?
I feel no, it's very time consuming. Like
Uh,
even if you're not on the clock, you have to always have your phone because they
mhm.
can call you any time of the night and you have
Okay.
to answer. So it's very like it's not like a 9 to 5 kind of job. It's like a on-call job.
Okay. So from moving on to like growing, learning, gaining experience, what would you say are the tools that are necessary in order to achieve this job so it could run as smoothly as possible? Because you said there's many factors that could come your way without
Yeah.
knowing, but what tools could help you like overcome those situations?
To be honest, you have to have a very good time management. You have to be very good.
Hmm.
You have to think on the spot,
Hmm.
make decisions at the spot. Like you cannot wait for somebody else to do it. And a lot of the times it comes to whatever you choose and deal with whatever is the least bigger issue, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Like you have to choose your battles when it comes to
Yeah.
this.
Okay.
In order for you to be successful, to be honest, I feel that you have to have a very thick skin because
Okay.
sometimes you'll get screamed at on the phone and
Mhm.
there's nothing you can do because you still have to fix the problem and they're screaming at you and you cannot hang up. So you have to, have patience, a lot of patience,
Yeah.
team effort. That's another thing because even though, yeah, it might seem like you work on your own, you do have to have all these people working at the same time with the same purpose,
Yeah.
like seeing the same thing that you're seeing. Like the driver, even though sometimes they, and sometimes you even work as a what is it called? Like a referee between these people because you have to go in between them and be like, okay, I get your point and I get your point, but how about we settle this thing and just
Yeah.
move on? So I don't know. I feel like there's many, many things, and it just depends also on the type of company you work with.
Hmm.
Ultimately, if your colleagues are good and your boss is good, they'll make your ride smoother. And
Hmm.
if they like a lot of communication, it will make your job very hard.
Okay. So for you, when working in these companies, what do they offer you in order to achieve that? Like what software system, or is it just on your own, just simple communication methods, or because everything is a funnel, right?
Mhm,
And so how does that funnel include you in a sense?
mhm. So again, I know I keep repeating this, but it is the truth. It just depends on your company
Mm-hmm.
because some companies, especially the bigger companies, they provide their own software
Mm-hmm.
because they have so many trucks. So they already have like specific things that they're looking for to load their trucks with. Um, Smaller companies, though, they do. I've noticed that a lot of them go based on what they hear from other people that have trucks, like
Okay.
other owner operators. So if they see like, oh, you know what, this website was good for me
Mm-hmm.
because I found some loads.
Okay.
Okay, I'll try it too. So it's by
Word of
uh,
mouth.
word of mouth. There we go. Yes. So smaller companies usually tend to do that. Bigger companies, they'll either have their own developed software or um, what is it called? They'll hire
Mm-hmm.
specific groups so that they can have their software. So it just depends where you work, but mainly like owner operators, it's mainly the smaller pages. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, some that come to my mind, I don't know if all of them are still working, but I remember using them back in the day. Truck Stop, Get
Okay.
Loaded,
Mm-hmm.
DAT, like those kind of websites. A lot of trucking owner operators, I know they'd use those.
Okay. And for you, when does your um knowing like all of this software system and then also communicating with the truck driver, when does your job end truly like uh with the load per, per se?
With the
Like,
load. Okay, it literally ends once they deliver.
okay.
Yet, if you work on a complete trip, because that's
Hmm.
what they call them, the trips, there might be several loads within that trip. So as
Yeah.
from the moment they leave their base or their headquarters
Hmm.
until they come back,
Hmm.
that's your responsibility.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if they got unloaded on Friday and they won't reload until Monday. You still have to be on the lookout the weekend because if anything happens to the truck, you cannot reload them. So you have to stay on top of those things.
Hmm. So how, as a dispatcher, how would you avoid deadheads?
Huh. That is actually a thing that everybody wants to avoid. One,
Yeah.
because dispatchers don't get paid for if they have to do like a 200-mile or 150-mile deadhead, you don't get
Hmm.
paid for that. You get paid for that A to B
The
freight.
first trip, basically.
Yeah, that's all you get paid for. And the driver obviously doesn't want to run miles without
Empty.
getting paid.
Exactly, yeah.
What we do is normally you look around the smallest radius that you can,
Hmm.
if possible, because sometimes some cities they really don't have any outbound loads. So
Okay.
you already know, like for instance, Florida. Florida more than likely will not have any reloads unless it's the time of produce such as corn or other uh, agriculture produce, right?
Hmm.
Other than that, you know that once you go there, you have to set your mind like and included in the load that you did, the miles that you will be losing or
Mm.
deadheading. You
Okay.
already know. So it's like that's the job of the dispatcher. Like, okay, this load is gonna pay 3,000, but guess what? You're gonna lose about 200 miles in a day to reload them. But the
Hmm.
driver, if he's okay with it, you'll go ahead and proceed to get it.
Hmm. So, okay, so in my understanding, when I've been doing my research, I've heard
Mhm.
a lot of complaints about Florida and specifically, but I understood it as, oh, because it's you go so deep and then to come back out is just
There's
like,
nothing.
oh, okay, so it's basically, so it's seasonal. Seasonal when
It is
there's,
very seasonal. And also, again, there's a lot of companies that, oh, and this is a thing that sometimes new trucking companies don't understand. Certain loads that are going to pay you super good to go to Florida is because they already know there's going to be absolutely nothing to come out. So they're paying you maybe two and a half per mile or $3 per mile, but you will lose almost 50 cents to come out of there. And we're talking about a 400, 500-mile deadhead.
length. Yeah.
Or the other thing that you can do, um, you just take it and do a load that is going to pay you like 30 cents a mile, just so that it can recuperate a little bit for the diesel that you're going to spend. But to be honest, like you have to have that in mind whenever you go to, and it's not only Florida, it's other states as well. But mainly, to be honest, it is Florida is one of the hardest ones to get you out of.
So you're from Clint, right?
Yes,
Um, Clint is basically, I would consider it a border town. Would you not say it?
it is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what are your experiences with crossing the border? Did you ever have to work with that? How difficult is that for you, or what are the challenges faced with that?
You know, I try not messing with that to be honest,
Okay.
because there's a couple of different options for that. So sometimes trucking companies pay to go over borders in Canada as well as Mexico. So you can do the tri-state.
Yeah.
I mean, tri-country, right?
Hmm.
Uh, but most of those companies already have their trucks that they are willing to take over the border,
Hmm.
knowing that most likely they will damage them over there. And insurance goes up and everything's very high, right? Permits and all. So I try to stay a little bit away from that because if something happens to the truck in Mexico, even though it's just literally as soon as you cross, it would be our border city would be Juarez, right?
Yeah.
But as soon as you cross, you have no control over that.
Hmm.
And if it's hard for you to control something in the States where you can actually just fly if in emergency, over there is very hard because it's different laws, different government, different rules, everything's different.
Hmm.
So a lot of people, what they do is that, and this is very common in El Paso, you'll get a shipment, especially like meat,
Okay.
any kind of meat and poultry. They'll take it to the border. They have this cold storage
Okay.
warehouses. They'll hire them. They'll unload there. They'll bring a Mexican truck, load it, and they'll take care of it. And it's less hassle for the U.S. companies to do
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay. So now moving along, um, you have so much experience as a dispatcher, but what do you think is still lacking as a dispatcher in order to make your job easier?
What is lacking? Huh. You know, something that, to be honest, is very hard, not only to truckers, but also to dispatchers. Because, like I said, most of the independent dispatchers do work by commission. The fact that sometimes the loads can pay, I'll just put a number, 1,000,
Hmm.
but the broker will offer it for 500.
Okay.
So that discrepancy in the rates is something that sometimes dispatchers wish that it would be more transparent.
Hmm.
Obviously, the dispatcher has to earn something. Obviously, those people they have to, everybody has to have their cut.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's so big that not only the trucker loses, but the dispatcher loses because it's the same amount of work for very little payment.
Yeah.
So sometimes maybe yeah, the commission, but it's nice whenever you get to agree with the trucker that if the the load pays very little, you can hire up. It might not seem fair, but trust me, the work itself is what it's a lot. So if the load pays very little, then you can get an extra percentage.
Mm,
And
okay.
sometimes you can work that out with the trucking company
Hmm.
because it's still, to be honest, it's a lot of work for, and you lose sometimes maybe 2, 3 days, and your payment is $50 for that truck. So
Yeah.
it's like nothing, it's very minimal.
Hmm. It's basically a fairness thing.
Mhm.
So for you, to begin to wrap up, what type of training do you feel is essential, for new coming dispatchers?
Training. Ugh. You do have to know the rules of your state.
Hmm.
Every state has their different rules. You do have to have an understanding of the DOT overall
Hmm.
because that will save you a lot of headaches.
Okay.
If you don't know the rules, if you don't know how the trucking industry works, not because some people think, oh, a dispatcher, they only get on and they just find the load and that's it. No, you have to keep in mind how many hours your driver has been running. You
Mm-hmm.
have to keep in mind when was the last time they got a medical examination. Like all these things you have to know
Mm-hmm.
because if anything goes wrong, again, it all just comes back to you.
Yeah.
So training, like overall in the rules and stuff, I feel like that is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And also like before starting working, maybe do some research of the states that you're running because not everybody likes to run the 48 states. Some
Okay.
just like the Midwest or something. Figure out like where's the best opportunity that there's more outbound loads than inbound because
Okay.
that will make also your commission go higher.
Thinking smart. Okay, so now for you, knowing that many people see as a commission based sometimes very difficult, but it could also be very rewarding, right?
It is.
So, so
Mhm.
anyone that's aspiring this profession, what would you suggest them to actually do in order to prepare to make the money?
Again, you have to know your work opportunities.
Hmm.
If you see that there's a lot of trucks, maybe you can even be a commission dispatcher, not from your city. There's a lot that do remote jobs, and basically dispatching is a remote job. You can just do it from home. Obviously, it has to be a very organized
Hmm.
sense, but it's absolutely doable. Um, Figure out if there's a lot of competition in in your state or in your city. If you feel that there is, look somewhere else. It's fine.
Hmm.
So I feel like that is very easy. And also keep in mind that the more you do, as in find the best warehouses to go deliver, all those things are gonna be better for you because that decreases your job, not your job, but your responsibility with the driver.
Hmm. Okay, well, now how do you feel these last 10 years? How have you feel that the roles of a dispatcher has changed? Just to conclude now.
Honestly, I feel like nowadays, because of all these websites that I mentioned earlier, and because a lot of people are going straight to the drivers, I feel like dispatchers have been a little bit pushed aside,
Okay.
especially with smaller trucking companies.
Okay.
Because if they're able to reach somebody where they deliver and they can become friends or somehow connected, next time they can just skip you.
Yeah.
Another thing is that nowadays, because most of the people don't do a contract,
Hmm.
you can basically set up the whole company for them, get them connections, and then next day they can tell you, you know what, thank you for your help, but we got it now because you already set up everything for them. So I
Yeah.
feel like in that sense, it's a little bit dispatchers are becoming more like not as necessary for for smaller companies, especially when you already help them set up.
Mhm. Okay, so it's basically kind of um know the balance in order to maintain your position.
Yes.
Basically, how would you say? Well, um, Merari, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure to speak to you. And anything that you would like to say to the audience before we go?
Well, just have patience. Any job requires patience. If dispatching has taught me something, is patience. Have to breathe sometimes. Just breathe and everything has a solution. Even if it doesn't, why worry so much about it? That's it.
Okay, well, thank you for participating. Thank you for watching. And if you have any dispatch stories, I would like to invite you to comment below and share your stories of your time as a dispatcher.